Most people think Star Destroyers are shaped like a dagger to intimidate you. That's not why. The real reason is the same engineering logic behind World War II battleships and modern armored vehicles, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. The triangle isn't a symbol. It's a solution to a very specific set of ballistic problems. And to understand it, we need to spend some time with the Iowa-class battleship before we go anywhere near a star system. An Iowa-class battleship measured 887 feet 3 inches from bow to stern and carried 9 16-inch guns in 3 triple turrets. 2 turrets sat forward, one behind the other, stacked in what naval engineers call a superfiring arrangement, meaning the second turret fires over the first. 1 turret sat aft. That placement wasn't aesthetic preference. It was the solution to a geometry problem. How do you put 9 16-inch guns on a ship and ensure as many of them as possible can fire at a single target simultaneously? The answer was the broadside. All 9 guns could be trained to cover a single broadside arc, concentrating the ship's entire offensive weight on one hemisphere of the compass. The specific measurements matter here. Turret 1, the foremost turret, could train to 70 degrees off the centerline. Turrets 2 and 3 were constrained to roughly 65 degrees each, blocked from rotating further by the ship's own structure. But within the broadside arc, all 3 turrets achieved overlapping fields of fire. A target in that zone faced every barrel that could physically reach it. The Yamato-class solved the same problem at larger scale. 9 460mm guns, 18.1-inch caliber, the largest ever mounted on a warship, in 3 triple turrets, same superfiring forward arrangement. The Yamato's main turrets trained approximately plus or minus 150 degrees from the centerline, a sweep of 300 degrees total. Below and behind the ship sat a roughly 60-degree dead arc where no barrel could reach. Every warship has a dead zone. The engineering question is how small you can make it, and how you defend it with other assets. Now look at an Imperial I-class Star Destroyer from directly above. The bow narrows to a point. The hull widens steadily toward the midship. The dorsal surface carries a command superstructure, flanked by heavy weapon emplacements on a broad platform. The canonical Wikipedia entry on the Imperial I-class states this directly. The designers took advantage of the wedge shape to give the heavy cannons the ability to focus on targets in the forward firing arc. In the forward hemisphere, nearly every gun aboard converges on a single target. Weapons in the brim trenches, on the major hull plates, and on the dorsal superstructure all overlap. The hull geometry dictates where the guns can go. The guns determine what can survive approaching it. 60XX9 heavy turbo laser batteries, 60 NK7 ion cannons, 6 dual heavy turbo laser turrets. On a 1,600-meter hull, every system was positioned to maximize overlapping coverage in the forward arc. The same geometry Iowa's superfiring arrangement achieved, just executed in 3 dimensions rather than 2. One correction worth making. The Iowa's narrow beam wasn't a deliberate firing arc optimization. The beam of 108 feet 2 inches was the maximum permitted by the Panama Canal's 110-foot wide locks. American battleship design was partly constrained by a canal in Central America. History is occasionally like that. The narrow bow actually caused handling problems. It made the ship wet in heavy seas. But turret geometry determines arc, not hull beam, and the superfiring arrangement still achieved maximum broadside coverage. The lesson Kuat drive yards appears to have internalized. Put the weapon platform where you need it, narrow the bow to reduce your forward silhouette, and let the turrets do the work. The second pillar of the engineering argument is armor. An angled surface forces an incoming projectile to travel through more material than the plate's nominal thickness suggests. The physics is direct. Line of sight thickness equals nominal plate thickness divided by the cosine of the slope angle from vertical. A 45mm plate tilted 60 degrees from vertical presents an effective thickness of 90 millimeters to an incoming round, double the nominal. The Soviets built the T-34 around this principle. Its glacis plate ran 45 millimeters at 60 degrees, and when German crews encountered it on the Eastern Front in 1941, shells were deflecting off armor they should have punched straight through. Actual penetration testing showed a real-world protection multiplier closer to 3.6 times the nominal thickness, because oblique impacts also deform the projectile and increase ricochet probability. The T-34's front plate resisted fire equivalent to significantly heavier vertical armor. The Panther tank was Germany's direct response. Its glacis plate ran 80 millimeters at a steep slope, copying the T-34's design philosophy in heavier steel. The Iowa-class main belt ran 12.1 inches of armor at 19 degrees of inboard slope, lighter than a vertical belt at equivalent protection. The Yamato's belt went 410 millimeters at 20 degrees. Both ships traded minimal weight for meaningful improvement in protection against the oblique fire that dominates real combat, because ships rarely sit perfectly broadside to each other at the moment of impact. A Star Destroyer approaches the same problem in 3 dimensions. Any attacker on a forward approach encounters the angled dorsal surface, the canted hull flanks, or the narrowing bow tip, all of which force incoming fire to strike at oblique angles rather than perpendicular. The geometric principle is identical to the T-34's sloped glacis. Change the angle of impact, multiply the effective thickness, increase the probability of deflection. Now, because this argument is only interesting if we're honest about where it breaks down, the ventral gap. The Imperial I-class has a documented problem. The underside is dramatically underarmed compared to the top. Most of the heavy firepower lives on the dorsal surface. The ventral area is dominated by the attack hangar, with only 2 large turbolasers mounted near its forward corners. Get below a Star Destroyer, and you're dealing with point defense cannons and lighter systems, not the full battery that greets you from above. The aft quarter adds a further dead zone, where turret coverage was explicitly confirmed as absent. Imperial tactical doctrine accounted for it. Veteran captains maneuvered to keep threats out of that arc, and deployed starfighter squadrons to cover the ventral approach. The Empire wasn't pretending the blind spot didn't exist. It was managing it with other assets, which is exactly what the Iowa did with destroyer escorts and torpedo nets. The ISD's weapon geometry is well optimized for its primary mission, forward arc capital ship combat, and poorly optimized for small, agile craft that can exploit the underside. Real warships make the same trade. The Yamato's broadside was devastating. Its anti-aircraft defenses couldn't stop American dive bombers. Engineering choices have costs, and the wedge shape buys maximum forward coverage at the price of a soft underbelly. That's a design priority, not an oversight. ILM's model shop in 1975 operated out of a warehouse in Van Nuys, California. When the team needed surface detail for the Star Destroyer miniature, the dense mechanical greeblies that convince the eye it's looking at something miles long rather than 4 feet, they bought stacks of Tamiya and Revell kits, 1/700th scale battleships, 1/35th scale armor, aircraft sprues. They stripped these kits for parts, pulling details from World War II warship models and gluing them directly onto the Star Destroyer hull. That's a literal physical transfer. World War II warship surface details transplanted onto a Star Destroyer miniature, photographed for the opening shot of A New Hope. The DNA of World War II naval engineering is in the texture of the original filming model because it's physically in the model. Colin Cantwell designed the original Star Destroyer concept before Ralph McQuarrie joined the project. He was responsible for the X-Wing, TIE Fighter, Death Star, and the Star Destroyer in the first film. One of his early Star Destroyer designs was described as a cross between a stacked World War I naval dreadnought and the Flatiron Building in New York. That Cantwell concept was eventually canonized in Andor as the Cantwell-class arrestor cruiser, named after him on screen in the show's first season. His design lineage runs from a WWII dreadnought concept directly into verified Star Wars canon. No documented interview exists where Joe Johnston says he looked at battleship schematics when positioning the turrets. That gap is real. What the record shows is a design team that started with a naval dreadnought concept, detailed their miniatures with physical warship parts, and produced a ship whose weapon placement follows the same geometric logic as the Iowa's superfiring arrangement. The most straightforward reading is that they were thinking in naval terms, because naval terms were the closest real-world reference for what they were building. By 1999, that lineage started to show its age, not because the designs changed, but because the production technology did. The original Star Destroyer filming model ran 3 to 4 feet long. The Super Star Destroyer built for The Empire Strikes Back reached roughly 10 feet and contained approximately 250,000 individual parts. Both were limited by what physical miniature work and optical compositing could achieve. Then the Phantom Menace arrived, and ILM under John Knoll moved to predominantly CGI ship design. CGI had no ceiling on surface complexity. The prequel trilogy's Trade Federation battleships and Republic cruisers carried detail density orders of magnitude beyond anything a physical model could achieve at any scale. They looked intricate, precise, and clean in a way that original trilogy ships didn't. The 1977 ships had the weathered, irregular texture of World War II naval photography, translated into physical miniature form through literal kit harvesting. The 1999 ships were textured by artists at unlimited digital resolution, with no physical constraint on complexity. Both were supposed to represent technology from the same galaxy. The Clone Wars and the Galactic Civil War are separated by 19 years in universe, but the visual gap between those trilogies reflects 40 years of production technology, not 19 years of in-universe design evolution. Your brain catches the inconsistency and files it as something wrong about the universe, but it's not an in-universe problem. It's a production technology problem. By 2016, ILM acknowledged it directly. Rogue One went into production with the explicit mandate of matching the 1977 visual language. The ILM team framed it plainly. A New Hope, by design, they were actively encouraging themselves to match the original aesthetic. That's a film studio consciously trying to close a visual gap that opened because their tools got better across 4 decades. The in-universe explanation fans often reach for, that Kuat drive yards simplified their designs during the Imperial era, is a clever, retroactive justification for a production reality. The ships look different across the saga because ILM's capabilities changed, not because the Empire issued a fleet modernization directive between Episode 3 and Episode 4. Now, 3 ships that deserved more than a footnote. The Gladiator-class, 600 meters, designed by Wallach Blissix for Rendili Star Drive, originally conceived as a Republic escort for the Victory-class during the Clone Wars. The design never reached production before the Republic's transition to Empire. The Imperial hierarchy decided the larger Imperial class didn't need escorts, a judgment that proved increasingly questionable as the Rebellion scaled up its capital ship capability, and Kuat drive yards repurposed the specs for long-range independent patrol. The armament runs to 12 dual-light turbo-laser turrets, 10 point-defense medium laser cannons, and 10 assault concussion missile launchers, backed by 8 tractor beam projectors. It carries 24 starfighters and 1,200 stormtroopers in 2 battalions. Black market value, 34 million credits, against the Imperial class's 150 million. At 3/8 the length of an ISD, and a fraction of the cost, the Gladiator was built for the missions where deploying a full Star Destroyer was disproportionate force. Its first on-screen appearance was in the 1985 Star Wars Droids animated series, aboard the Demolisher under Admiral Screed. The class didn't receive an official designation until 2008, when the Force Unleashed campaign guide finally named it. For over 20 years, fans just called it the Demolisher class, after the only ship of the type they knew, which says something about how thoroughly it had been overlooked. The Allegiance class carries the official designation of battlecruiser. It sits above the Imperial class in fleet hierarchy and carries 12 gun batteries, arranged 6 to port and 6 to starboard, plus 3 axial dual heavy turbolaser batteries along the centerline, in a layout that mirrors the ISD's dorsal turret arrangement, but heavier. What the Allegiance trades away is everything that isn't fighting. No hangar bays, no assault capacity, no garrison deployment capability. In exchange, it gets heavier hull armor and more guns than a standard ISD. The Allegiance was a pure capital ship combat platform, a line of battle vessel in the tradition of the Iowa and Yamato, optimized exclusively for destroying other large warships. The fact that the Empire maintained this, alongside the multi-role Imperial class, reflects a fleet architecture that understood the same distinction real navies have understood for a century. A ship designed to do everything does nothing as well as a ship designed for one specific job. The Victory III. No official Victory III class exists in Legends or canon. Every reference traces to the Star Wars Fanon Wiki, which is explicitly a fan-created fiction repository. The Victory I and Victory II are both documented. The Victory I, at 900 meters, rushed into Clone Wars service with enough design flaws to earn a reputation as a spacefaring coffin. The Victory II, a service life extension program that fixed some, but not all of those issues. The third iteration that circulates in comments and conversations is a fan construction, what people want the line to have become, not what it did. If you've been searching official sourcebooks for it, that's why you can't find it. The demand for the designation tells you exactly what the audience wants. A Victory class that bridges the gap between the Vic 1's raw firepower and the Vic 2's ion cannon suite. That ship doesn't officially exist, which is probably why people keep asking for it. The Empire built a broadside dominant capital ship that happens to look like a dagger, for the same reasons the Iowa looked the way it did, and the Yamato looked the way it did. Narrow bow to reduce the forward target profile. Widening midship platform to carry maximum weapon mass where it needs to be. Weapon emplacements arranged so that nearly everything aboard can overlap on a single target in the forward hemisphere. Angled hull geometry that forces incoming fire to strike oblique rather than perpendicular surfaces. Tarkin was right that the Star Destroyer's scale communicates something. He just had the causality slightly inverted. The size communicates power, because the physics produces power. The triangle looks like the weapon. Your hindbrain has been reading a broadside-dominant capital ship silhouette correctly for 40 years, recognizing the same geometry that put the Yamato and the Iowa at the top of their respective fleet hierarchies, without necessarily having the vocabulary to explain why. Subscribe if you want more of this. The engineering logic behind the ships everyone else treats as scenery.